I'd like to talk about dialogue and collaborative practices. How can we facilitate collaborative conversations that offers fertile means to creative ends? I have been teaching students on that and consulting with professionals, and often I hear they saying that they already do that in their organization. However, when we unfold the talk, I realized that we are not quite talking about the same thing. So I think it's important to make a distinction here, that even though we are talking about people talking, there are many ways of talking. So communication might be taken from many different perspectives. And I think it's important to understand what are the assumptions behind types of conversation. And when I talk about dialogue here, I'm pretty much based on the notion of relational beings. This is a notion coming from Bakhtin, and he talks about we as beings in language. And being language, we are beings that are always making meaning. So we are relational beings. And taking this approach, it leads us into what Bakhtin describes dialogism, which is different from monologism. So if we take these two concepts, monologism really prioritizes the individual, focusing on his or her motives, beliefs, and cognitive abilities to understand. So monologism is pretty much about individuals and their minds as the source of knowledge and meaning. On the other hand, dialogism is more focused on the relational process of communication, and in that sense embraces a relational view of a person. So when I'm talking about dialogue here, I'm really taking this dialogical approach on dialogue, which means that we are really focusing on what happens in between, what happens with people when we put people together to talk, what kind of meanings might emerge. And in that sense, one way to differentiate with monologism and dialogism, I would say, roughly talking, could be the notion of dialogue instead of debate. When we talk about debate, we are pretty much focused on persuading, on finding the rationale of a talk, on finding the true meaning of what is happening. And usually there is a way to justify and defend your own opinion, and at the end you have one final best idea that is that emerged, or is the embraced one. On the other hand, dialogue is more about inquiring to learn, is more about putting people together to generate new meanings, is an openness to diversity. Because if you're not if you're not looking for this ultimate truth, this ultimate best idea, so the more differences we have, the better is a conversation, because it brings more possibilities of novelty, of innovation. So dialogue here, it's very much about a process of relational coordination, giving attention to the potential of these multiple realities that emerges when we have different voices. It's not about the right way of talking or the best solution at the end, but more about finding generative ways in which people can feel connected, can become willing to get involved, and that also generates more responsibility for a particular project, because when you are connected, involved, you really feel part of the project, so you take more responsibility on that. Also, there is an author that talks about the tensionality of the dialogue, because when we're talking about generating new meaning, we don't mean that anything goes, or you should leave behind your values or your ideas, but it's more about creating this tension between holding my own ground, which is what I think, what I believe, but at the same time letting the other come to you, let the other happen to you, which means be open enough and curious enough to have these ideas coming to you. And this tensionality brings the creative movement, the creative relational process that brings different possibilities in a conversation. So to finalize, I think the invitation with this type of approach in dialogue is a change from this monological way of understanding people and conversation and move into this dialogical way, embracing humans and people as relational, so all the time creating and making new meanings, and at the same time an invitation to letting go this urgency into having this best, the ultimate truth, but really focusing on what might be the local contextual truth of this group of people, of this specific organization. And in that sense, you always move from a very static and linear process of communicating and open up more for creative processes, generating new possibilities, generating social changing and social innovation within organizations.